Welcome, Finding Current, Human Presence, Water, Air, Sound Stories, Performance. I'm İpek Çankaya. What we've been listening to was Tolga Ayıklar playing Marine Hur, Mongolian Marine Hur improvisation and throat singing. The piece was called Flow. 2022 marks the 11th year of collaboration of Halka Sanat Projesi and Artship Initiatives. During this time, this collaboration has created numerous live storytelling performances with music and stories and movement, and also visual exhibitions, each year in different times of the year, separately in Istanbul and in San Francisco. Since the global pandemic, we keep coming together on this new platform to share our work. Thank you for being here today with us from different time zones and different geographies. As usual, this performance is nurtured and grandfathered by Slobodan Damjajic with the close collaboration of performers from Istanbul, Belgrade, and San Francisco Bay Area. Usually when we have the performance in the physical space, we also have a visual art exhibition as a parallel event. And we invite our audience to visit the exhibition before the performance or during the intermission. To continue with this tradition, we start today by giving you short glimpses of two visual art exhibitions. First, we will go to Istanbul, and Olcay Karahan will tell us about her current Halka Artship exhibition, which is installed in Resonance Istanbul space in Moda. Then Marta Zlatar from San Francisco will tell us about her upcoming exhibition, which will be in the fall in the Resonance Istanbul space again. And during Marta's presentation, Tolga will play live again to support her presentation. Then we will proceed to the performance pieces. Olcay, we are with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Olcay. I'm contemporary dance artist and a performer. Spent most of my life in the theaters and in the studios, and worked on the physical self and the body, and listened to my body while I was moving. And first time doing visual art. I have never done a visual art before. So it was quite a different process for me. And the process started keeping the food from leftovers. And so I was eating them and using them and leaving them in some places, and following them, how they change with the temperatures, and changing their dynamics and their textures, and such as like orange peels and eggshells and garlic roots and some other materials. And time was excited for me because they were moving them, I was moving by them, and they were moving me, and I was moving them, so it was a real collaboration. And I followed instinctively their, well, which color this is going to be, and what type of, what kind of shape is going to be. So, like that. So I'd like to share this with you now. And here. These are eggshells, like clusters and bunch of eggshells. The first eggshells, and it was a single shell I was painting, and this time, why not? I just make a bunch. And mostly I was painting, but this one told me not to paint at all, so I kept it plain, and which was more, made me feel better this way. Orange peeled, so turned into a kind of bird. I mean, looked at me like a bird, so I gave little shaped, made the tail and perhaps the nose, and curved in, and it did actually stand on itself. I used manga pens, which those pens I had. I didn't really knew what kind of paint I could use. Then I moved on a acrylic paint after. Some broken on the journey, which is on the left, and but still surviving. This is a lemon. The only one is the lemon. They're mostly orange, but this is a lemon one. Right now it's cold season, and they're really fragile, and they become so hard they can break easily. But in the summer they're very moist and floppy. Eggshells. Orange peel. tangerine feel, actually. All the eggshells together, moving in relation to each other. Garlic roots, so after being used, cleaned and filed, and all the surface become really filed and yeah, like this. Orange peels on the wall, eggshells on the shelves. Eggshells had a broken little circle which became the eye for me. And the one on the left was looking towards her, was really broken like this. I didn't really give the shape of it. So it was there already, the face was already there. Orange peeled, just stand it by itself. And again, by itself, I had to play a little bit to make the tails, and also did stand by itself. So they do help on the process, and they are being with you, and it's quite fun. I recommend everyone. So thank you.
Martha?
The images, yes?
Yes, please.
Hello, everybody. The images you're about to see were not intentional. They simply appeared. They are reflections of me on the window of my apartment overlooking a garden with a wall and an avocado tree. And even though it is my face on these photos, I don't feel that these are pictures of me. They look and feel like mysterious, almost mythical creatures that are peeking through the foliage to say hello. We exist. I call these reflections the garden maidens. They've been appearing for the last 10 years, and it's not until recently that I started to really pay attention. So I'm in my apartment working or eating my breakfast or simply sitting on my sofa. An ray of sun will hit the windows across the buildings for me, which eventually illuminate my face, creating a reflection on the glass. So now, on sunny days, at certain times of the day, I know that the garden maidens will appear, and so I wait for them. When the beam of light shows up, I get under it, and some version of myself appears on the window.
Sounds of welcome, sounds of the sea. Bamboo cutters.
This story is from Japan's Edo period. And once there lived a bamboo cutter family, a husband and a wife. And they were the only bamboo cutters of their village. And they were hard-working two people. And the man was in charge of going to the forest, cutting the bamboos, carrying them to the home. And the woman was carefully peeling them and drying them, resizing them. And although they were the only bamboo cutters of their village, they were living a quite modest life. And even there was a hole on the ceiling of their house. When it was raining, the water was entering inside. But they were quite okay with their life, except one thing, which is they couldn't have a child. And one day, in the August 15, the bamboo cutter went to the forest in the night. There was a full moon on that night, and he was to cut bamboos for the temple. And when he was cutting the bamboos, in between the trees, he saw a stone, a shiny stone, and he lifted it up, and it wasn't gold, it wasn't silver, but it was as shiny as the moon. So this poor man, he couldn't take anything he found in the forest because his house was full of bamboos. They were invading lots of space. But this stone, somehow he wanted to keep it. And then he went back to home, and when he showed the stone to his wife, with the shininess of the stone, the whole room lit up. And the night passed, the full moon settled down, and this stone turned into a baby. A beautiful, beautiful baby, and they were so happy. And they named this baby Kagawa, which means the moonshine, because she was as shiny as the moon. And when people came to bamboo cutter's house, they saw this, they noticed this baby, and they were quite surprised. First, the beauty of this baby, and second, all of a sudden this old couple had a baby. How is that possible? And this word of mouth spread around the village, and people came to bamboo cutter's house to see the baby. But they had to buy the bamboos also. So with that income, they were able to cover the hole on the ceiling. So this baby brought fortune to them. And the years passed, the moonshine grew, and she became a beautiful young lady. and her hair was silkier than the clothes she was wearing, and her skin was soft like feathers, and her eyes were sparkling like the stars, and when she smiled, it was like the moonshine. And so this beauty appealed to young boys of the town, and everyone was so into her. But the problem was the moonshine didn't want to go outside. Although she was so polite, she just wanted to stay at home. So the boys started to ask the father, why are you keeping the moonshine? Why is she not marrying any of us? Because she's on the age to marry. And they just kept asking this question to Bamboo Cutter. They just kept teasing him. So this poor man one day got tired of all those questions and went to home to talk to Moonshine about her marriage. And then he said to Moonshine, you know, my daughter, I love you, but you're on the age to marry with someone, and I want you to go out and live your own life. And the Moonshine said, Father, I don't want to go anywhere. I want to live in this house. I can't live without you. I love you and my mother. And the father said, I love you too, my daughter, but love does not teach us to be selfish. And also there are many suitors who wish to hold your hand. Just see them, maybe change your mind. And the Moonshine said, okay, father, I will marry any suitor who can do my wish from him. So the next day, there were 3 young boys from the town inside the Bamboo Cutter's house. And the Moonshine didn't smile to any of them. And with a strict voice to the first of them, she said, I want you to go to Chinese forest and bring me tooth of a lion. And to second of them, she said, I want you to climb up the Himalayas and bring me ice from there. And to the third of them, she said, I want you to go to Tibet and bring me a bowl which is as shiny as the moon. So the first one went to Chinese forest, but when he faced with the lion, he was so scared he couldn't do it. He came back. And the second one was questioning how to bring the ice without melting. But it wasn't the issue, because before reaching the top, he was so exhausted. So he decided to turn back. And the third one went to Tibet. And there was this generous monk who gave him a shiny bowl, and he took it to the town, but it wasn't as shiny as the moon. So none of them could do it. And this impossible wishes of the Moonshine began to known around the town, around the country. Even the emperor heard about it. And the emperor said, I want to see this beauty of the Moonshine and her wish from me. I can do anything anybody wishes from me. So he hid his identity and went to the Bamboo Cutter's house to become a suitor for the Moonshine. And as soon as he entered the house, the Moonshine immediately understood who he was. And she said, the noble one, I have only one wish from you. You will not push me to marry with you. And the emperor said, okay, but in return, can I have your friendship? And the Moonshine said, okay, you can have it. And then the father didn't accept any more suitors, not to make Moonshine sorry. And in the years, the Moonshine and the emperor developed a friendship. They were both into haikus and the tea ceremonies. They were reading bashos, spending time with each other. And the emperor never pushed Moonshine to do more than the friendship. And he never married to any woman else. And one day, in a night, the Moonshine was looking outside, looking to the sky, and was crying. And the father saw her crying and asked her what happened. And she said, I'm seeing those dreams for years that the moon people are coming and take me to the moon. And there is this voice told me, Father, it's going to happen tomorrow, 15th of August. They will take me. So the bamboo cutter didn't know what to do. So he desperately sent a message to the emperor. And the emperor said, no one can take moonshine from me. So tomorrow I want my whole army in front of the bamboo cutter's house. I will be there too. So the next night there was full moon in the sky, and the whole army was waiting in front of the house, and the emperor himself was waiting in the front with his sword. He wasn't a coward man. And they locked the moonshine into the cabinet, and they were waiting. And all of a sudden something appeared coming from the moon. And when it got closer for a while, no one could see anything because of its shininess. And after their eyes got used to it, they saw that this was the moonshine. And everyone was quite shocked, waiting for an explanation. And the moonshine said, I was actually coming from the moon to teach my people the mortal life. But now I finished my duty. I should go back to my people. And she returned to the emperor and gave him a potion, a small bottle. And she said, you were always a good friend to me, so this is my gift to you, the potion of immortality. And then she said last goodbye to her family and disappeared back to the moon. And the moon was so bright that night. And the emperor broke the bottle to the ground and said, what am I going to do in a life without the moonshine? But maybe when moonshine raised her successor in the moon, maybe she was to come back to the earth again. Maybe that's why she gave the potion to the emperor. But poor man, he lost his chance and he never got married in his whole life. And the bamboo cutter family continued their life reasonably okay. But they opened that hole in the ceiling like old days. So when there is full moon in the sky, the moonshine can enter the house.
Ancient chords, our responses.
First, let me start by saying that I'm not a mathematician by nature. I went through school like everybody else, but math was never a strong subject of mine. It used to be that math was much more integrated into our everyday worldview. And only since the French 18th century of enlightenment, it became something to be studied, something elevated. In ancient times, it was understood that music and harmonics, let me start by saying, in Pythagorean times, math was integrated into the musical study of harmonics. And harmonics studies how things relate to each other and how they are ordered within themselves and how this relates to music. And in the ancient times, it was understood that music was related to the entire structure of the world. There are many creation myths that talk about how the creator sung the world into being. For instance, like in Hindu mythology or in Polynesian mythologies, there are stories like that. In the ancient Greek times, in the cult of Orpheus, it was understood that music was a power from the source of creation. There are musical traditions in Egyptian that developed structures of music that go thousands of years back, that developed structures of music that create a sense of wholeness and completion with the nature and the environment around us. So Pythagoras studied with the Egyptians for 20 years, and they accepted rarely outsiders into their midst to study. And Pythagoras had to undergo and pass severe tests in order to be allowed to study with them. After 20 years, the Egyptians sent him back to ancient Greek territories to open a school to teach what he had been given, adopted in part to the ancient Greek sensitivities of the culture and of that time. So the Pythagoreans studied how the ratio of musical scales related to numbers. And for this study, the instrument they used was the monochord. Now this is a monochord. In those days, the monochord only had a single string, but this monochord, as you can see, has 2 strings. And these pegs are used to change the tone. Now, each position on the monochord was equated with a number. And by playing 2 tones together, it was possible to hear the different musical ratios. Both of these strings are tuned to the same note. Now, if you play 2 musical notes together, it was possible to hear a mathematical ratio too. So therefore, by making math audible, the Pythagoreans made it possible to have an inner experience of numbers and to combine it with the external experience of measurements. And by making math audible, in their days, numbers were not dead abstract concepts like they are nowadays, but it was possible to experience them through the inner experience of sound. My deep connection to music and singing comes from my grandmother, who always sang to me whenever I was in her care. And the very first sense to develop for the embryo in the womb is the sense of hearing, when the mother sings or the sounds around the embryo help connect the embryo's sense, the sound development in the brain. So the connection of the development that connects the brain, and it creates a neurological sense of togetherness for the embryo. So let me show you the monochord.
Seeking water.
Eren was making a research about ancient sanctuaries. So this time again, that name came up to him, Aya Nikola. But it wasn't the first time he heard about that name. First time he heard Aya Nikola from his grandfather. He told that after the Balkan War, so when they have to immigrate to Turkey from Bulgaria, so they have to stay one night in that ancient sanctuary. And he told that he met Eren's grandmother in that sanctuary. But Eren's grandmother said, no. So we already know each other before. But that was the first night we spent together in a same room. But of course we was not alone. We were with the other immigrants. But it was a beautiful night. And Eren thought,
So this is the time, it's a sign. So I have to visit that ancient sanctuary. And maybe for my research, I can find a proof that before Christianity, some of sanctuaries or monasteries were also holy places. He drove a map for that settlement, so he wanted to visit. And when he was drawing a map, he realized that near that settlement area, there is a village, and around that sanctuary, there's a lot of caves. And also the sanctuary carved in a monolith rock. So he thought maybe that sanctuary was before that very ancient time a cave. And he thought I can visit some caves too. When he arrived at that village near the sanctuary, he asked one villager if he is find the sanctuary. And the villager answered, follow the river. You will find under the hill that entrance of that sanctuary. So, of course, Eren saw from other maps that there was a river. And he drew the river on his map too. But he couldn't find the river. The water vanished somehow. So he saw many signs that there was a river before. So there was water crystals, there was mints, and also there's a way which definitely belonged to not a river maybe, a creek, but that was a riverbed. But the water somehow vanished. So for reaching that monastery and ancient sanctuary, he has to continue his way. And upstream, he walked to the north. And on the way, he saw that willows bent over, and almost they built bridges over the riverbed. And he got more curious about it, because the water should be vanished soon, because that these plants and trees couldn't live without water nearby. When he got closer to the hill, he heard some water noise. And then he saw that from upside of the hill, there's one rock face, and there was a waterfall. And that from that waterfall, maybe the water carved itself another way to underground. And it came up to the ground, who knows, somewhere near the village. And under the hill, he saw the entrance of the sanctuary. And of course, it was an abandoned sanctuary, and there was no doors, no windows left. But it was very possible that there are some windows and there's an entrance. When he entered the monastery, he saw a corridor going down to the darkness. And he saw some birds are flying inside and flying outside. And he looked up to the ceiling, and then he saw some signs which are definitely not belonging to Christianity. So that sanctuary should be ancient, more than maybe 2,000 years before, built it for who knows. And he thought, why there are swallows flying inside? So they are not cave birds. And then he saw some effect of light on the deep inside that sanctuary. So he continued to deep that sanctuary. On his right side, he saw a room, and definitely, or possibly, it was the room that his grandparents slept one night together with the other immigrants. When they continued deep the corridor, he saw that there's a reservoir filled with water. So he thought maybe that's why the swallows flying inside and drinking from that water, and then they flying back. And he turned back, so the bright light was coming to his eyes, and the swallows making shadows placed on his eye. And he thought that swallows are immigrant birds. So he remembered his grandparents. He thought, so they were like immigrant birds. They came here, they drink from that water, and they continued their way to their new home.
Continuity.
Caso Gabriella Nida Sorivita que se dirá Juan Gamborita Heribo Neridoziba ha ha ha Gose Ridibo Nara Difizi ha Naha Le Riboba Ngara Dizita ha ha ha no. Caso Redibola ho ha ah ah ah
Cave echoes.
Among prehistoric caves all over the world, we find a similar motif, and that is of clusters of circular marks painted on the walls. And researchers have found recently that these circular marks may mark a certain place in the caves. For if someone stands facing those circular marks and sings, the whole cave resonates and responds. One example of a cave with these circular marks is the cave in Peshmerl in the Pyrenees, and I'll share an example of what that looks like here. So you can see these circular marks painted among these horses. And when I saw this photograph and was thinking about who painted this cave like this, a whole story came to me. And it's a long story, So I can't share the whole thing with you now, but I would like to share the beginning. And then we'll start a new way of sharing in the fall, and we'll have one person share a long form story, and come in the fall, I will share the whole story with you. So here's the beginning. Arndt didn't know who his mother and his father were. His mother died in childbirth, and Arndt was raised since a baby by his uncle, his mother's brother. And the uncle took care of this little child and carried him with them as he and his band, the whole clan, migrated through forests and over hills, across plains. And as the boy began to grow, the uncle couldn't hold him very long anymore and helped the boy walk beside him. And one time when the clan was crossing over a large rocky outcropping, the uncle had to pick him up and carry him over several stones and over crevasse crossings. And at one point, the uncle held on to the boy and reached up and, while crossing a crevasse, grabbed a hold of a stone, but the stone gave way. And to stabilize himself, the uncle needed both hands to hold onto the wall of the crevasse. But he dropped his nephew, and Arndt fell into the crevasse. He gathered other family members to climb down into the bottom of the crevasse, and there they found the boy, and he was alive, but he had landed on his foot, and his leg was terribly broken and twisted, and he could no longer walk. He could only hobble. He certainly couldn't run. But sometimes this band needed to move very quickly, and sometimes while hunting, they needed to run. And so many of the members of the group were concerned that this boy was going to slow them down because his injury was not one that could be easily healed. So on their regular travels, periodically, once every year or so, this clan would stop at a group of sandstone rocks, between which lived two old men who they referred to as the elders. And one evening they stayed overnight with these elders who kept a large fire burning in the middle of their rocky outcropping. And some of the members of the family shared with the elders their concern that this young child was going to slow down the movements and migrations of the whole clan, and they wondered what could be done. And the elders thought about it, and at the end of the evening, they told the clan, "We know what to do. The boy shall stay with us." And I'll tell you the rest of the story in the fall.
Lullaby Roots.
Une belle journée. Vous pouviez le voir de très très loin. On a clear day, you can see it from miles away. Passing through the gate, the levee, step inside the wall. It was a village, the market. Stairs invited you to climb all the way to the top. When one knows the place, one can cut through gardens and wooden doors. One can hear the seagulls and breathe the salty smells. stairs, many, many stairs. Always more than one thing. In the shadow of the big walls with moss, when you get to the top, in contrast, the cloister is more refined, delicate, with an overview of the entire bay. Above, there is a tower with a sculpture and with wings, probably a guardian of the space. Puis il y a une tour avec une sculpture et des ailes, probablement un gardien des lieux. When one, up there, one could fly. This was all experienced by Mylène, who visited this place so many, many times. Plus tard, dans la vie, elle évoquait ses souvenirs en chantant une berceuse à son enfant. Later in life, she brought all those memories in a lullaby that she would sing to her daughter.
Semaya's memory.
Semaya lived long, more than 90 years, and she was happy with her big family. Only her last couple of years, she suffered from forgetting. First recent events, then names, then faces, then almost everything. She can remember in her last years only some couple of memory from her childhood. One of them was from her childhood from Kars. She lived when she was 4 or 5 years old. Kars is a city in eastern Turkey. It's a border at the border of Armenia. Their house is at the edge of the city, and in the mornings, some farm animals and shepherds are passing from the way in front of their house. And sometimes she saw some small goats, cannot be controlled by the shepherds, and they jump into the old church's broken door into the church, and they climb all the stairs up to the top of the bell tower. There was no bell indeed, but it's still a tower full of little arches. And Semaya can see the heads of goats on that tower. And as a child, she wanted to be together with them very much. Of course, nobody can allow her to go to climb there. But in her mind, she saw those images every morning before getting her pills and she's telling these memories. And the other important maybe for her memory was about a well, old well. In the same house, stone house's backyard, there was an old well. Indeed, municipal pipelines came into all houses at that time, but most of the people didn't destroy those wells. And they covered it with a cap, with a wooden cap. That was a big well indeed. The wall of the well is almost 1 meter, and the diameter is almost 1.5 meters. So it is very dangerous for the children. And the adults and all aunts, uncles started to tell scary stories about that well. Fairy tales are full of insects, snakes, monsters. And they are telling there are dark rooms in that well. There are corridors. And you know, these kind of things provoke children's imagination. And they are more curious. And Semaya is also wants to be with the elders, and elders also frightened her. They opened the cap of the well, and they listened to the sounds coming from the well. There are some echoes, scary echoes. She remembers that. And in her mind, she combined some other memories and other people. And sometimes she hears, as if she hears some voices coming from that well. Somebody is calling her name. Semaya, Semaya. Somebody is calling her, but for what? What reason? Maybe they are relatives or maybe neighbors. She has to prepare some food, some meal. Yes, she's her döşeme, very well-known meal. She can prepare it for the visitors. She needs some chicken, rice, and what else? Lemon, maybe, onions. But what is the portions and what is the order? Even how can she open the oven? And when she's tired of all those things, all those details, she usually screams at that point. But suddenly she remembers that tower again, that goat's heads are looking to the blue sky, to the city. And in her mind, she also can see all cities she lived in for a while, from Baku to Kars, from Kars to Erzurum, then Istanbul.
Benevolence of sound.
Abu Nasr al-Farabi and Abu Ali Hussein ibn Sina lived during the golden age of Islamic sciences and discovery. Between the two of them, they came up with a lot of research and a lot of work and research into many different sciences and many different topics, such as astronomy, physics, music, sound, healing, and medicine. In fact, Ibn Sina's book, Kanun fi Tib, or the Book of Medicine, or the Encyclopedia of Medicine, was one of the first encyclopedias of its time with medical terminology. And of course, Farabi wrote the great book of music, book Kitab al-Musiqi, which is still referenced today. And he was very influential in the field of music. as well as music therapy. There are 12 particular makams or musical modalities that Farabi mentioned that have a direct and definite effect on the human body, the therapeutic effects on the human psyche and the organs. And those are still being used in places like, especially in Turkey, there are still musicians playing at the hospitals for patients who are suffering from different ailments, and the sound and that particular music, the modalities of music help them heal. Makams are really just musical modalities. They're unique compositions of melodic compositions with the tonal sequences, different oscillations, and they're very much unique to that piece of music and have a direct effect on an emotion. For example, Makam Rast is known to give you feelings of joy and happiness. Makam Isfahan is meant to give you self-confidence, courage, and the motivation to do something, the motivation to move your body. Makam Husseini relaxes you, calms you down, and there's multiple other emotions that are induced in these makams, such as feelings of gratefulness, infinitude, limitlessness, sometimes sorrow and pain, sometimes they elicit humbleness. So there's a lot of different emotions that get elicited from these music modalities. In comparison, the Persian Daska system is very similar in that it also induces emotions. It also evokes images of a place, of a people, of ceremonies, for example. There are variations in the Persian Daskas called gushe, and they could be associated to like a place, like a geographical location. For example, the composer could have been sitting by the ocean or by a river, or in a jungle, or in the desert, and he or she composed something, and it very much gives you those feelings of that particular region. Also ceremonies, they could be wedding ceremonies. They're composition made for funerals, or simple acts of like taking a bath in a river, or baby being born, or soldiers marching off into war, or soldiers coming back from a long war into the arms of their families and being welcomed with food and wine and other things. So there's music for every type of ceremony. The other elements or feature of the Persian music is called avaz. Simply avaz means singing. Normally the singer chooses the lyrics from a piece of poetry or a portion of a long poem or just a single poem that fits into the feeling of that particular music modality. So in that way, Turkish makams and Persian daskas are very similar in the evocation of emotion, the evocation of people, of places, and of ceremonies. So it takes one back, to these places, even if you haven't been in them. You sort of get that feeling from it. So I would like to sing for you a small piece of Azerbaijani music that I heard when I was growing up. My parents were from Tabriz, my mom, maternal side of the family especially. They were very much listening to these Azerbaijani and Turkic type music, so it's very familiar to me. I can hear the sounds, and so they tried to sing it. I heard it on the radio, so I will also try to sing a small piece. This one is called Ayrılık, or Separation. Fikrinde geceler yata bilmirem, bu fikrin başımdan ata bilmirem. Fikrinde geceler yata bilmirem, bu fikrin başımdan ata bilmirem. Neyneyim ki sene açabilmirem. Ayrılık, ayrılık, aman ayrılık. Her bir dertten olar yaman ayrılık. Ayrılık, ayrılık, aman aman aman ayrılık. Her bir dertten olar yaman ayrılık.
Grandmother's bedside story.
When I was a child, I used to spend quite some time with my grandmother, especially in the weekends at her house. At night, she used to put me in bed, tuck me in, sit by my side, caress my hair, say some prayers and good wishes for me, and tell me stories. Grandma's stories were not fairy tales. She was basically talking about her own life, her childhood, her school years, her work, and her life as a working mother. She became a mother just after the Second World War ended. Back then, they were living in the neighborhood of Şişhane in the Beyoğlu district of Istanbul. Let me share a photo with you. These are my grandparents with their only child, my mother. Judging by the age of the little one can say that the photo was taken around 1950. The buildings we partially see behind them was where they were living at the time. Those buildings were constructed in a consecutive order, all facing the main road we are seeing in the picture, and beyond it, facing the Golden Horn. The Golden Horn, or Haliç as we call it, is the main inlet of the Bosphorus in Istanbul. If one follows this road towards their left side, the road would take them to one of three bridges across the Golden Horn. At the other end of the bridge, there was my grandmother's workplace. She was from the first generation of men and women who had access to higher education, even if they were not coming from a privileged background. And also first generation of women who had a profession in the newly built societies of the 1920s Turkey. So she worked for 29 years as an accountant in the main manufacturer of tobacco and alcoholic beverages in the country. She only retired when she became a grandmother, but that is another story. So when there are two working parents in a family, they obviously need some kind of help with their child. And one thinks of the immediate family or the closest relatives to help them. But in the case of this couple, my grandmother was coming from an immigrant family from the Balkans who was settled in Bursa, and she came to Istanbul only after she married. And my grandfather, who was a native of Istanbul for several generations, had at the time a mother and two younger sisters. On paper, these three women sounds like a good support group. But in reality, they too were working. They were actually teachers working in different cities of Anatolia for many years with their families. So my grandparents were alone with their child with the support of some young babysitters from time to time coming during the day. But their actual support came from somewhere else, from their neighbors. In many of my grandmother's stories, the neighbors appeared in different ways. Sometimes they were present just by keeping an eye on the little girl. Sometimes they were stepping in more effectively because their urbanity was much different than we are experiencing today. These people, at least on those Shishane buildings at that time, were sharing their life together. They were not knowing each other just by name or by simple greetings from time to time, but they were exchanging their food, they were participating in each other's special days. Different cultural backgrounds were sharing a life in there. So there were many incidents, she told me, that the neighbors were present in their lives. But there is one that was really crucial for them. One day, my grandmother received a phone call from one of the neighbors saying, "Leave everything aside, just come here. We know that they are in the house, but nobody is answering, so you have to be here. Just come, just run." And so she did. She literally ran from work to home a few kilometers across that bridge. And when she got closer to the building, she looked up to the 5th floor where they lived. And on the balcony, she saw the swing going in and out of the balcony with her child in it. She even saw the child's hair shining under the sun and saw her smiling and laughing without really knowing what was going on. So as she told me, with the last remaining bit of strength on her legs, she ran up 5 floors. She entered the home with her keys, reached out the balcony, stopped the swing, and held her child finally safe in her arms. That day, their life could have turned into a totally different direction if it wasn't for their neighbors' active presence. You see, my grandmother's stories were not typical bedtime stories either, but I was never frightened because there was something in them that she made them about, not about the dangers or misfortunes or misdeeds, but they were mostly about affection and care, sometimes about resilience, but mostly about the warmth of being surrounded by good people.
Soku-song. Discovery to share.
I grew up in Davis, California, which is about an hour and a half's drive from San Francisco. My parents didn't visit San Francisco very often when I was a child, but for two occasions, once in the winter holidays and once on Easter Sunday, where every year we would visit Golden Gate Park and the Japanese Tea Garden, which became one of my favorite places in the world. The different structures and architectures and the beautifully pruned trees in the garden just delighted me, and I loved and looked forward to this place every year. And as we left the garden, we always went through the rear exit, and that would lead back to the car and the rest of our lives if one took the fork on the right. But there was another fork to the left, and as a child, I wanted to explore that direction. It led up to what looked like a staircase in the distance, and I urged my parents, let's go up to the top and see what's up there. But it just looked like there was a big tree, and maybe the staircase really didn't lead anywhere, so no one wanted to go up there. And we went home. But about 30 years later, I returned as an adult, and I saw that staircase again, and I decided to climb it to see what I'd find. And to my amazement, I discovered there's a whole lake up there on the top of the staircase. The designers of the lake, the designers of the whole Golden Gate Park, put this lake, the largest lake in the park, on a plateau so that you cannot see it if you drive through the park or walk through the park on ordinary paths. It's only accessible if you take a one-way road that doesn't seem to lead anywhere or climb this staircase. And then you can discover Stowe Lake. So many native San Franciscans don't even know that it exists. It's a beautiful place, and you can walk a path that goes all the way around the outside of the lake. And so I was really excited at the prospect of sharing this place with my painting students at College of Marin. And I thought, there's so many beautiful places and things to see here that we could find something to paint. So I met my students early in the morning, and we set up our pochade boxes and our easels and found different things that we could paint, while in the morning the walkers circumambulated the lake and greeted each other. So some people found this Chinese pavilion across the lake to be particularly attractive and started painting that. And other people found other parts of the lake that they wanted to paint. One of my students picked this particular view of the Chinese pavilion, and she was new to painting. Although she knew a great deal about art and about painting intellectually, this was her first painting class, and certainly it was her first time painting a landscape and her first time painting outdoors and in public. So she was rather insecure about this whole thing of painting. And this is what her painting looked like. I'm actually having trouble getting this image to share for you. My screen share isn't working properly. So I guess you can't see that painting. When we were having lunch, I noticed during the conversation, I was looking over her and I saw this man stop and look at her painting for a long time. And so I interrupted the conversation. I said, turn around, take a look. And oh, there's the painting. That's her painting in progress that he was looking at. And so she took a look behind her and she saw this man looking into her painting for it's what seemed like several minutes. And when she looked back at me, her eyes were full of tears.
A river story. A river story.
This sound is used in Himalayan tribal community. Young kids use this sound to call their mother, sometimes grandmother. Some elderly tribal people, they also use the same sound to call their ancestor, and in their language, they call it ancestral calling sound. Once upon a time, long time ago, in the Himalayas, somewhere near the origin of Ganges, there used to be a Himalayan tribal community village. And in this village, there used to be a family. They used to make saris and other clothes for the entire village. For the generations, they were making these clothes and the saris. Now there are three sons of the family, those who were running the business. The youngest one was always very reserved and shy, hardly talked to anyone. Growing up, he realized that both his elder brother, want to take his share of the property. And that's why there was always a conflict in the family or some dispute or fight. Everybody used to call him Kaku. So Kaku decided that he will not stay in the family during the daytime. So in the morning, he used to wake up, he used to have breakfast, and he used to walk in the forest, in the mountain, till the time he reached the river Ganges. At the shore of the Ganges, he found there's a big stone, a big rock. He used to go and sit on that rock every single day. He was doing it for quite a while. Once he was looking at the other side of the river and he saw a woman washing clothes. He tried to call her and shouted, but there was no response because the sound of the water was so much, because it was rocky river in Himalayas and it is hitting the water. He cannot call her. So he started shaking and waving his hand towards her, but there was no response. Lady was very busy and in her thoughts washing her own clothes. Then he went back. Next morning he came, sat on the same rock, and waiting for the woman, but there was no woman today. He came the next day. Then again, it was like she came after a week's time and she started washing clothes. This time, again, he started waving his hand and he got lucky. The woman other side saw waving, man is waving his hand. She waved to him back, and this used to be quite often because she used to come once in a while to wash her clothes. The other side of the river, all the villagers, they used to wash their clothes in a particular place. But because they used to chit chat and gossip about village so much, this woman needed her alone time. So once in a week or twice in a week, she used to come to a separate place where she can wash her own clothes. And that's how she used to meet Kaku and have her communication without any words. This happened for years, and then one day, lady came with her 7 or 8-year-old son, and he was the other side of the river. And Kaku, as usual, was waving hand from the other side. Both of them, they saw each other, and the kid was very happy to see someone in this isolated place. There is no other human being, and he was very happy. They started playing with each other without any word, without any oral communication. There was a communication with gestures. Kaku started making some stone balancing art for this young kid. And the young kid also got inspired, and then he started also putting the pebble one on the top of each other as a stone balancing art. This happened for years, and all of a sudden the lady, she used to take one fresh branch of a tree and put it in the river. And usually Kaku will come down from that rock and will go into a river little bit to grab that piece of branch. And this happened for months and for years. And he wasn't aware that what's going to happen, and there was no communication about that what is going to happen, but there was only this process. Every time she used to take a branch of a tree, she put it in the river, and the Kaku other side is ready to grab that. And after a year's time, lady decided to send a gift to the Kaku. And it was her most beautiful sari, which she decided to send. So she folded that sari and put it on that branch and put it in the river. Kaku at the other side, down the stream, was ready to grab it. And he just walked a little bit in the water and grabbed that piece of sari. He folded it in a beautiful way and looked at it. While he was looking at it, he realized that this design of the sari is pretty much similar what his family made. While he was putting a little bit more emphasizing on the design, he realized that this sari belongs to his grandmother, which his grandfather made it by his own hands. But by looking at it, he was wondering that how could this sari go other side of the river where there is no bridge and it is impossible to send the sari upstream.
Balkan harvest songs.
As an ethnomusicologist, I had the main task to go to the field, to do the field work, to go to villages and to record old time traditional songs that used to be sung by the women and men in the villages during the year and life cycle. And my first fieldwork was about 70-80 kilometers southern from Belgrade, and I took some recordings of the songs of my people there. And the musical form that was the most amazing for me, that I learned from a woman named Mira, is a musical form that followed the melodic model, that followed harvest songs in this region. This melodic model consists of two parts with similar form. The first is longer and the other is shorter. And they function as a call and a response. Each of them starts with an exclamation on word oi and ends with a cry that, according to some explanations, has a function to chase away the bad evil powers. During the harvest day, many different texts were applied, were made, were sung to this particular model. It sounds like this. Oi, sunce, jarko sun, se jarko i. Oi, postoj na visokoj. And there is another song on the similar model coming from another geographic region, and it sounds like this. Postoj sunce rano, rano ne zaodi. Dana vezem bratu, žito na rukách. Tu tě pýtat, brata, švýcarský junác. Koj ty veze svílu, žito do lakát.
Patterns. And that was the final piece. Ipek, do you want to say something?
Well, tonight we've been almost 60 people sharing the screens, sharing the moment. So it was really a pleasure and excitement. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you everyone for coming. And see you soon, next fall. Hello.
Görüntüyü istedim şimdi. Ben mute ediyorum buradan.
These technicalities.
Yeah, technicality.
But we survived.
We did.
Mm.
And really,
What do you say, Slobodan?
well, I'm kind of speechless because I'm totally amazed that everybody came and we are here and we did it. And in spite of technicalities. So I don't have any wise words to say or anything. I'm just so touched by the performers and by the people turning up. So we'll keep going in spite of whatever coughs we have been given and technological hiccups and other things. So really, thank you everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye bye.